Welcome to the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast with Brent Wright and Joris. Hello, everyone. My name is Joris, and this is another episode of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. And, essentially what we're doing in this podcast series is to look at the digitization of prosthetics and orthotics. We're looking at what happens when, your individual orthotist or prosthetist ends up going the digital route. And is that going to be a huge impact on this whole market? Or is that just going to be maybe a flash in the pan? Or is it only going to be for certain things? And I'm going to be doing this, as always, with Brent Wright. So hi, Brent. How are you doing?
Hey, Joris. It's good. It's good to be back and back in the swing of things. And I am excited about having Nick on the podcast, Nick Rhoad, today. And I think this is the first time that we've had somebody that actually is a user of a 3D printed prosthesis on the podcast.
Cool. So tell us a little bit more about Nick then. Tell a little bit more about his background then.
Yeah, well, so I look forward to hearing a little bit more about Nick, but Nick, his prosthetist. Good morning. His prosthetist essentially reached out to me and said, "Hey, I've got a patient that is interested in a 3D printed prosthesis. Can you do something for me?" And so we ended up fitting him. I've actually never met Nick. I've talked to Nick on the phone and we've exchanged messages a few times. But Nick actually, after we fit that prosthesis, he somehow tracked me down, phone number and everything, and said, "Man, the 3D printed prosthesis is pretty cool." And so Nick is a super busy guy, but he gives great feedback as well. And his prosthesis is one that is super detail oriented too. So I'm looking forward to getting that kind of feedback from Nick as well. So Nick, thanks for being with us today.
Hey, good morning. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So Nick, tell us a little bit about first of all, what kind of person are you? You seem like you're like a businessman. You're very busy with a lot of different things.
Yeah, I'm a chief executive of a not-for-profit that focuses on government regulation, and so we get up every day to work to make regulations in the United States more customizable for various state governments, and really making sure that regulations are right sized to the appropriate amount, not too much, not too little. So I'm running a rather large organization with high demands and very high functioning teams all over the country, and so it's a pleasure to get up and do that. But I also remind everybody that don't forget your major sports leagues are also nonprofits. So we're really running a business at the end of the day.
Okay. And what kind of? And you can drop the name of the business. Don't worry about that kind of thing. So what is it exactly?
So it really focuses on making real estate regulation better throughout the country.
Okay. All right. And so in that kind of busy life, you at one point needed a prosthesis. Do you want to go into a little bit of what happened?
I do, sure. So I wore a leg brace pretty much up until high school due to a birth defect, and then slipped and fell on some snow that had melted on one of those freshly waxed school floors.
Oh no!
And had a lateral dislocation of the patella by about 90 degrees. It was almost a complete 180 dislocation. So then we had the opportunity to chat again with the orthopedic surgeon, and really kind of gave three options to remedy the problem, and that was to have an ankle fusion, to repair the knee, and just hope and wait for the best. Or two, it was to have a below the knee amputation and get a prosthesis. And so, we're thinking back into the mid 90s, that was right when the carbon fiber was coming onto the market with socket. It was kind of starting to see some of those, flexing feet to provide some level of energy return. But that's also back at the time when you were still having to cover your leg with some type of ointment to get the complete system to function uniformly. It was also right about the same time that the shuttle locking system was coming out. So you go back to the mid 90s. We're looking really at this point. I'll date myself here. So we're we're 25 years back, and you look at the advancements of what has gone on in the prosthetics and orthotics industry. I even remember back into the 80s when, you'd go back into the laboratory and guys are smoking over the canisters of acetone. So we've come a far way since the orthotics days. But I live a very active lifestyle. I have a wife and 3 kids, a menagerie of pets, and we have our most unusual pets right now. We've got some land here, so we have 4 ducks that actually listen better than the dogs do. And then with work, it's stress is something that amputees need to be concerned about with their overall health and wellness. And look, work provides a level of stress, and I encourage everyone to manage their stress in productive ways, and healthy ways. But there's also a component of travel. So I need to have a prosthesis that I can get up in the morning and have reliability that it's going to work and fire every single time I need it, whether it be because, when you're away from your prosthetist 2,000 miles away, you can't swing by and pick up an extra sleeve, or if you crack the shell, you need to have that reliability that's just not something that you need to worry about.
So you talk about it in a very positive way, like a very empowering way. But okay, we're rewinding back to when you had that really important operation when you were a teenager. I'm guessing were you always like this? Were you always like this kind of attitude, or?
Yeah, attitude is something that everybody can choose. It's not chosen for you. And so you can get up every day and you decide what kind of mood you're in. You decide what you're going to do. We're inundated as Americans. We're very blessed and fortunate to live in the greatest country in the world with a free market and choice. And we have thousands and thousands of choices to make every day, from, the 50 different ways to make your hamburger to getting up and, who do you want to follow and what do you want to, fill your mind with every day. And one of the things that you can have a choice of that people forget, and it's entirely free. It doesn't cost you anything. You can choose what attitude to have. And so it's a really simple decision to make.
Okay. And is that attitude important? Like if you saw, you could imagine that somebody with his prosthesis could kind of feel that they're kind of cursed, or that they're kind of like, or somebody else could just take this on their chin and keep on marching. Is that the advice you give to somebody else who would have a prosthesis maybe later in life or in a traumatic kind of scenario?
Well, I'd give that advice to anyone that's going through traumatic experience or an amputation, whether you're a new amputee or an amputee of 25 years. And I remember when I went back into the operating room, I did say to the nurse going back, why me? And I still remember it 25 years later, the nurse looked at me in a very stern voice and said, "You knock that off right now." And that was the only come to Jesus meeting I ever had, and it lasted at about 4 seconds.
Wow. So, Nick, so tell me about the prosthetic journey. You haven't always seen Matt, is that right? So
I have not always seen Matt. So I jokingly say, right, there's three people in the world that a man should have a very close, intimate relationship with, and that's his wife, his barber, and his prosthetist. And fortunately, I'm Italian, so at 44, and so I still have good hair in the front. My girls tease me about my bald spot in the back, but I've lived in the same state and for most of my life, and I'm not opposed to driving an hour and a half to see a prosthetist. So I've only really, in 25 years, I've only seen 3 different prosthetists, maybe 4, but they've all have worked together throughout the same course of their professional career. So I see Matt, but interestingly enough, Matt trained with the first prosthetist that I saw, and the second prosthetist I saw worked and went into business with the first prosthetist. So it has to be someone that you have an absolute trust and bond with. And you need to, if your prosthetist asks you a question, you need to be exceptionally open and honest with them. And, you might not always find the right word to describe what doesn't feel right with your prosthesis, or if you want to make a modification, And so you have to find someone that uses the same language that you do, and that's kind of how I ended up at Matt. And ironically, the prosthetist that I was foreseeing moved out of the territory, so I was kind of wandering around trying to look for a prosthesis, a new prosthetist. And one day I was at our neighborhood pool, which is strange. I live in a small neighborhood, but there's 4 amputees in our neighborhood, which is just absolutely bizarre. It's
Wow.
nothing environmental. We all just kind of ended up here. And there's a guy who lives down the street, and I saw him at the neighborhood pool. And I'll talk to anybody. I mean, I'm the kind of person, I'll walk into a room or a store, and I'll know everybody by name before I walk out. And so it's like, well, what's taking Dad so long? Well, he's in there making friends with strangers. And I see a guy at the pool. He's got a water leg on. I walk up to him like, hey, I jokingly broke the icebreaker. I said, I'm sorry, I don't know if anybody told you, but there's only one amputee allowed in here at a time. I just want to make sure that you understand I have the monopoly on the cool guy with the fake robot leg at the pool. And ever since then, he and I hit it off. He's like, well, who do you see? I'm like, well, I kind of need to see a different person. The guy I was seeing, he's kind of left the market. I've been putting off some prosthesis care until I can find the right guy. I've interviewed prosthetists all over the area, just haven't found the right person. And he's like, well, you need to go see my guy named Matt. And you walk into Matt and you walk into his shop, and it's kind of like walking into the McLaren factory. It's very chic, but Matt listens. He treats it as a science. And that's why I'm very much into technology. I constantly push my team to try new things, bring me solutions, don't bring me problems. Tell me what I need to know, not what I want to hear, and I have that expectation for my prosthetist as well. So I'm gonna make sure that you're comfortable being uncomfortable, and I'll push Matt. I'll do research. I'll push him to try new things. And I said, Matt, I want to try this 3D printed socket. And he's like, well, Nick, I've never really done it. I'm like, okay, so if you've never done it before, how do you know if it works or if it doesn't? And he said, I'm really glad that you pushed me to do that and to try that. And I said, with my residual limb, scanning doesn't work well. I'm still old fashioned when it comes to that. In order to get a good mold of my residual limb, it has to be hand cast with plaster. We've tried scanning, we've tried the water fusion. None of those really work. I'm also extremely sensitive about when somebody touches my knee. It's more of a psychological component than it is a biological component. But we really worked, and we really worked on trying the 3D printed socket. And I have to absolutely say, it is an 100% game changer in the prosthetics and orthotics industry, hands down. I have tried every liner, every suspension sleeve, so many types of feet, different ways to even flex and angle the foot. It is an absolute game changer. There's no other way to describe it. It's like going from driving a 1977 Yugo to driving the nicest Tesla that you can find.
And what's the difference in actually on a day-to-day basis? What does that mean? Does that mean you can work? You walk longer? Does that mean you work more comfortably? Do you have more energy? What does that actually mean?
So I've always, I lead a relatively active lifestyle with pit stops for movie theater nachos during the day. So I probably should work on my diet, but I still try to eat relatively healthy. But what that means is that, with 3 kids, your day starts at 5:30 in the morning because you got to get kids up, you got to get breakfast, get them on the bus, make lunches, and then you're at work. And then look, at the end of the day, kids have sports and social activities. And then by the time the evening's done, you have dinner. Then you get some nice quiet time with my wife, Christina. You're looking at 5:30 to 11 o'clock at night every day, 10 o'clock at night every day. And through that, the leg performs consistently, uniformly, without any interruption. A couple biggest differences that I have noticed with a 3D printed socket is leg volumization during the day. I'm not really having to worry about sock management. I pretty much always like to stage my legs at about a 5 ply, at and we could stage it at a 0, but I just prefer a little extra little padding between the socket and between the gel liner. And so I've always staged it at a 5, but environmental changes, diet changes, temperature changes, can certainly impact what your leg volume is. And for whatever reason, when using this 3D printed socket, the leg volume during the day stays consistent. I don't have the back pain that I did with other legs. We did not change the foot when we changed the socket. And I have a couple of theories on that. I think one is that there's the displacement of energy is more uniform. I also think I have a greater return of energy. You think back to the carbon fiber, where you would have the carbon fiber, but then in between you would have between the carbon shell and the liner, you would have the Brent helped me out here, but it was the kind of that moldable plastic
where you flexible inner.
Yep. Yeah, the flexible inner. But I feel that the flexible inners really allow for a lot of energy loss when you're using a foot where you really want that high level of energy. I also find that the vacuum suction tends to be greater. I've tried everything from the one-way valves to actually having electronic pumps to having a remote control vacuum on my leg, and this leg does not. It's a self vacuum that the air dissipates from the socket during donning, and it is uninterrupted during the day. I love it, and look, let's be honest. A 3D printed socket looks really awesome. That's going to say it is. It is a really cool looking leg.
That I remember doing your socket, and it was funny when I had first sent Matt some pictures, and he must have sent them to you, or he might have made the decision on his own. But he's like, "Yeah, I mean, I was hoping to make it look a little cooler than that," and I'm like, "Okay, well, let's add some flair to it." But that was a super fun one, and I think for the people that are listening too, is that Matt is super detailed when it comes to alignment. So when we actually brought your socket in, so not only alignment, but your situation was a little bit unique in that he wanted to try to get rid of as many components as possible. So we ended up lengthening your socket, the distal end part, a little bit more, so you don't have as many pieces and parts underneath you to then save on weight and that sort of thing. And so that was the other trick, from what I remember, was getting not only the length but the alignment the way Matt wanted it in there. So that was a challenge. But I want to kind of go back, because I've actually had another patient say the same thing that you're saying about the socket feels, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but more airtight, or like it holds the suction vacuum, whatever you have, better. Can you kind of tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I really think it deals with the monolithic design of it, Brent. And there's for those of you that have not seen, I'd really encourage you to reach out to Brent. And anyone here that's in the central Indiana area, if you want to see what it looks like, I'm happy to swing on by your clinic and so you can see what it looks like firsthand. But we talked about that inner shell a couple minutes ago, Brent, and there's still that exterior shell, but it's all monolithic. So that interior flex, it's not the flex, it's still all a single unit. I think that section really goes back to having that monolithic design. I also, having done this now for 25 years, I tend to wear a suspension sleeve one size smaller than what I would measure at, just because I like that really tight, snug feel. If you look at the way that suspension sleeves are designed, they're designed, one size fits all. You got small, medium, large. Just like if you go to Target and get a t-shirt, it's just not, it's different than buying a tailored shirt or a tailored suit. And I think that part of it is that the 3D printing really has the ability to pick up on some, micro differences that cannot necessarily be acknowledged when you are using a carbon fiber. I think it's just something that's reflective in there that every millimeter and every little change makes just the slightest bit of difference. And you also start to use that interior flex shell. You look at what that looks like on day one versus day 365. It really gets smoothed out, and so it's. I use the word friction, and that's not necessarily the right terminology, because you don't want friction on a socket, but there's just a little extra grip that with the material that's used with the 3D printed socket, and it's almost kind of like a Velcro, and it just kind of, I think that the combination between having that very uniform monolithic design that's just picked up in the digitization of the prosthesis compared with just that texture, it's an entire system that works together constantly during the day.
Very cool.
Brent, could you give us a little bit of details on this leg, just for somebody who's interested? What does Nick actually have, or both of you guys could do this?
Yeah. So, I designed the socket, so I'm not exactly sure what foot he has on it, but
I use a Freedom.
Okay, so Freedom foot. So his leg, if I was to describe it, cylindrical, thinner, and you can definitely see that it's a mature limb, but that there's some bony prominences, and that there are some areas that he doesn't that are very specific that you need to either offload or load. The one thing that we did that was very interesting is because we lengthened out the socket. And so what we mean by that is, so if his leg is, say, 8 inches long, we actually put the plate where we attach the foot at about the 10-inch mark. So there's 2 more inches that we had to build up to get the plate there before we attach to the foot. And the way that we did that was we created a shell. We lofted between 2 areas, and then we created a shell, and then we created some inner structures for strength there. And then on top of that, we did some neat kind of lattice structure on the outside, really just for look. It doesn't have anything to do with the strength of the socket, but there was like a 1 millimeter emboss, and it's a sharp looking leg. We used Multijet Fusion off the 4210. We did not vapor smooth that, and so that's the other interesting thing that we've started getting feedback on. Nick, you haven't seen the vapor smooth. It creates almost like your computer shell, like super smooth. It looks injection molded, but we've done that, and it looks amazing. But some of the patients are like, I really like that feeling of you described it, roughness or Velcro. And so we're now starting to figure out, like, hey, do we need the texture? Do we want the texture? Does the patient want the texture? Or do we need something smooth, or a combination of both? And that's been a very interesting discussion that we're having internally and with the patients.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, it's, do you either want to have that matte black or that nicely finished, shiny material? An interesting thing that I've noticed is that, my sockets have they've always used black. I've never really used a cover. One of the interesting things that I've noticed using the Multijet Fusion printed socket here is that I spend a lot of time outside, and it doesn't get hot to the touch. So whatever type of components are being used, or I guess, the cartridges that you're using to do the printing, it dissipates heat very well. And so in previous summers and in hot situations, my leg would just get hot and sweaty, because that carbon graphite does not dissipate heat. It just bakes in that sun. And this, while it will get warm if you sit outside by the pool for 5 hours, as anything does, it's not uncomfortable. And so that's something that I really kind of like. If you look, there's holes drilled when Brent talks about the lattice work inside, because it is a monolithic design. There's still that outside shell, but the holes that go through it. And if, I'm not sure if you're going to have show notes available, but over on my LinkedIn page, and Matt and I sent Brent a number of pictures. You're welcome to put the pictures in the show notes. I think that really helps tell the story. But it also has the ability to dissipate and transfer heat out rather than absorbing the heat.
Mm-hmm. And what strikes me is that you are really into all the lingo. You understand all the terms and terminology, all these things. You must have. Did you just learn this over the last 25 years? Or did you make a concerted effort to just know everything there is about this prosthetics world for you?
Well, that's Joris. That's a great question. So, you have to, at the end of the day, and it goes back to having a good attitude. Amputees, whether you're any patient, needs to do their best to educate themselves about the issues that impact their life. And so I try to ask really good questions and ask good follow-up questions, and then remember the information. So everything needs to have a purpose. It's not like being an attorney where never ask a question that you don't know the answer to. You need to ask questions that you don't know the answers to, because the more information that you have as an amputee, the bigger advocate that you can become for yourself as a patient. And so don't be afraid to challenge your prosthetist. I really challenged Matt of saying, no, you and I are going to do this together. We're going to learn together, and we're going to try to do, a multi-jet fusion printed socket and see what happens. And look, if it works, awesome. If it doesn't, you know what? We know next time that it's not going to work. So you don't know until you try.
What was Matt's original thought? Was he like, let's do that? And Matt and I, we do a lot of stuff together, but now, after you kind of connected the dots for us, but was he pretty open to it? Was it like, hey, let's do this? Or what was the discussion like?
So Matt is a perfectionist, and I think that Matt's concern was as a prosthetist that he might have felt like he was giving up control of the continuity of the practitioner and patient continuity of care. And I said, look, if you have a sick patient in a hospital, you have a primary care physician, and if you don't know what's wrong with them, or if you need to provide an adequate level and a superior level of care, you're going to bring in a team of specialists. And so you're still the choir conductor here, Matt. But look, if you're, my family doctor doesn't really know how to care for my prosthesis. So if there's something going on, they're going to refer it out to an orthopedic surgeon. And I told Matt, I said, look, you just need to look at it like that. I said, you are still my prosthetist. You are still providing that level of patient level care. But in order to provide exceptional care, you need to bring in the right team. And so just look at bringing in Brent or whatever 3D printing model you decide to utilize in your patient care model. They're part of your team. They're a resource. And I do it at my company. I hire people that know things that I don't know, because if you just hire what you know and people that are just like you, then you're working in a vacuum. And the only time that vacuum is good is in a socket. So, Matt's response after I explained to him like that, he's like, all right, fine, we're going to do this. And that would be the biggest thing that I would share with the prosthetists that are listening to this is do not think for 1 minute that you're giving up a patient care. You're just bringing in an additional specialist and an additional resource on that care team.
And another thing I think is really interesting, you don't see the prosthetic as like an endpoint. You see it as kind of an ongoing process, right?
It's an ongoing process. And look, I get bored with what I'm kind of utilizing about every 12 months, just because I want to see what the latest and greatest thing out there is. And I've even done a little design model that, and Brent, we won't share it here, but I've kind of worked on maybe a design that helps the suspension sleeve from slipping that you don't see on many other sockets, and we kind of just call it the Nick is what we refer to it as. But that's one of the other things that I really kind of noticed with doing the 3D printing is that the customization opportunities are unlimited, and so you really can do a lot of specific patient customization that you would not otherwise be able to do, or if you did, it would not be as patient specific.
But I'm just thinking about this. If I would be new to this, how do I start? I mean, how do I start being? It's nice for you to say that you should be kind of like very proactive in this, and that you should know this, or you should be passionate. I guess you're passionate about solving your own problem, I guess, together with these people you see as your partners. But I could totally imagine a lot of people just like, don't have that in them. And what advice would you give in that sense for me to become more proactive and really getting that solution made for me?
So I'm gonna make a plug here for the Amputee Coalition of America, or even your prosthetist. They have patient advocates that are available to talk to you. And look, every patient advocate is different. So I would recommend that you choose the patient advocate that's right for you, that it comes maybe from a similarly situated circumstances, just like my neighbor. He and I both have kids. We're about the same age. We have a lot of the same interests. So at the end of the day, right, there are certain things that I can explain to him and share with him that, quite frankly, other people can't relate to. But I'm not going to sit around and feel sorry for myself, because that's not who I am. It's just not going to work. And it just drives me batty, because there's so many resources out there for people to utilize. And if you're feeling concerned or worried about it, reach out to me, reach out to the Amputee Coalition of America. They even have a certification where for amputee advocates, just to be able to ask questions for new amputees to say, hey, how does this affect my life as a father? How does it affect my life as a spouse? How do I have a conversation with my employer to be like, hey, look, I've got to leave work, or sorry, I'm running late to work because I couldn't get my leg on this morning. Just things that you normally wouldn't think of. And a lot of it is also through trial and error of 25 years.
Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a good way. But one thing I do want to pick up also, but is you say scanning doesn't work for you. So let's go a little bit. We're more 3D printing focused here, but I think that it's really interesting that you really don't believe in scanning. You really don't think that's a way to go for you. So
that's a great question, Joris. Again, it goes back to one size doesn't fit all. And so scanning is not good for me, but it could be great for my neighbor. Shuttle lock system doesn't work for me because of my knee. But for the guy down the street, he absolutely swears by a shuttle lock system. So every patient is different. And that goes back to a point that I made early on. That is why it is so important to have a very open relationship with your prosthetist. So, and sometimes it's okay to call a timeout with your prosthetist to say, hey, you know what we're doing right now isn't working. Let's take a timeout. Let's kind of, take a step back. Let's think about, what's working, what's not working. And I'll tell you, I spent the first part of my career I spent in state government, and there was a gentleman named Bruce down in human resources, and Bruce had been in human resources since 1977. And really, I considered him to be one of the best mentors I've ever had in my career. And I had a very difficult human resource problem that I was dealing with an employee. And he asked me a question, and he just called a timeout in our conversation. I've really tried to apply that to other challenging situations. He just stopped the conversation and he said, Nick, what is it you're trying to accomplish? And that question is the best question that anyone has ever asked. And so when you're looking at, scanning or 3D printed, or do I use a Satch foot, or do I use a K3 or a K5? Go back and ask yourself, as a patient and a prosthetist needs to ask themselves, what is it I'm trying to accomplish with this patient? What is it I'm trying to accomplish during the day? And if you can kind of filter through all of that noise and just go back to that basic question, it will really help you figure out a whole host of things of what you need to do in that continuity of care for the prosthetic patient. And even as a patient, what is it you want to accomplish in your life and your career with your prosthesis? And that's how you look at it. But, scanning, Brent talked about some bony prominences. I've had probably 17 different orthopedic surgeries throughout the course of my life, from prior to amputation. And I only had there's only 2 traumatic experiences I've had with a prosthesis. One, I was installing a ceiling fan and decided to stand on a chair instead of a ladder, which is not a good idea. And I had a total lateral dislocation of the patella down into the socket, which is I wish I had passed out because the pain was so severe. And the other only scary experience I had was when many years ago when I was in college, we were doing cheap party tricks and I accidentally lit my leg on fire. So that was a good lesson. Learned. And, fortunately my prosthetist just said, look, you can do whatever you want to your prosthesis. I will fix it for you. I will repair it for you. I just don't want to know how it happened. And when I called him, I said, hey, I need to come in. I said, fortunately, the only thing that burnt was the Kevlar sock between the shell and the foot, because there's all that lint that goes down there. And for any of you that have gone camping before, you know that dryer lint is a great way to start a campfire. And I said, hey, Kent, I said, I accidentally kind of burned the foot shell a little bit. And he just said, look, I don't want to know how it happened. Come on in on Monday and I'll get it fixed. So, but for me, have had those 17 surgeries, scars, scar tissue, you got funny looking flaps, with that residual limb, and look, I'm Italian, and here's the interesting thing about it. Matt will tell you, he says, I am like one of only 2 patients where he has seen just hair on the residual limb. And I'm not talking about hair. I mean, I'm Italian. I mean, I'm that guy at the neighborhood pool where it's like, my God, can that guy please put his t-shirt back on? So, hair really does interfere with laser scanning. It creates too many error messages. And so for that reason, scanning doesn't work for me.
And I think the other thing, Joris, on that with his particular limb, and I can definitely see this. So a lot of times what prosthetists will do is they'll scan and it's in a non-weight bearing form, and then they may do like an overall reduction or what have you. So for Nick, what's super important is, and that's why they ended up doing the cast, he does have some of those sensitive areas, bony prominences. So you have to load specific areas. And right now, to simulate weight bearing, because that's what's going to happen. You're going to be putting your weight through your prosthesis. So for that, you really have to capture the details of, hey, where can I load? Where do I have to unload? And you just can't do that with a scan. Now, we're going to be getting better and better at that. But right now, that would not be the right way to take care of Nick.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. I did not know that. Okay. But Nick, so we've seen, like you mentioned a couple of times, the carbon fiber and stuff. You mentioned a couple of times how you like your new leg. That looks really cool. And we tend to think of like the aesthetics of these things have improved a lot, right? Especially if we look at this exactly your 25-year time span is where they went from being kind of really boring to looking really cool. Has that made a difference for you? Does that make life easier for you? Does that improve your experience overall?
I've challenged Matt. I said, the next thing that I want is to figure out is how to do a glow in the dark prosthesis, because I think that would just be really fun. I've never really been. I tried the cover for a brief amount of time, but it was bulky. It added weight. It would slip down during the day, and quite frankly, you shouldn't try to hide who you are. And so I just. Be comfortable who you are in your own skin and just own it. So I think that it doesn't matter how young or old you are. I've seen really cool prosthetic designs come out of Brent's laboratory that he's posted on social, where kids have like superhero kind of legs. I think that is just absolutely awesome. So it's just part of your wardrobe, and that's just kind of how you look at it.
Okay. And then another thing is like, what's changed? Because you had mentioned that the 3D printed leg is much better than before. But if we look way back to, let's say, your first prosthetic, what has changed for patients during the time? What are some of the major milestones that you think, oh wow, that was a big thing for patients?
Yeah, so I guess the biggest difference, yours, is that it actually feels like an extension of my body and part of my body rather than something that I'm slopping on there every morning. And so it doesn't feel like I'm dragging around a prosthesis. Look, I'll give you the best example. Look, you're busy. We all have busy calendars. I have a water lake too that I just use for swimming and showering, which is not 3D printed. It's just something to make sure that, you can, stand up in the shower and not fall down. You started to get ready, change my leg, put on the 3D printed leg, and spent 30 minutes walking around trying to figure out where I put my leg. It was so good. It was so good that for 30 minutes I forgot that I was basically an amputee. Like I spent 30 minutes looking for it's like, hey, have you seen my cell phone? Where's my cell phone? Oh, it's been in my pocket the whole time, right? Oh, I spent 30 minutes looking for my prosthesis and I forgot that I had it on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. That's a big difference, I think. That's a big difference. All right, Nick, thank you so much for your time. This has been absolutely wonderful, very empowering, very wonderful for you to share your story with us.
It's my pleasure. And Joris, do you have show notes available for this as well?
Yeah, we have something like that. We can put some stuff in there if you want.
Yeah, you can put my contact. You can put my contact information in the show notes. Happy to talk to practitioners, prosthetists, orthotists, patients of 25 years, or patients that are just starting down the journey. I make myself available to answer any questions. And look, no question is off topic.
That's awesome, dude. Thank you so much. It's very, very lovely of you to give your time like that. So thank you so much for being here today. And thank you again, Brent.
Oh, man, this was good. And thanks again, Nick, for sharing kind of that perspective. It's always nice to have a patient perspective and then patient along with 3D. I think that really kind of puts a bow on everything that we're trying to talk about.
It's fantastic. So.
All right. Thank you. And this is another episode of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. And have a great day. And thank you for listening. Have a great day.